Despite spending most of the offseason in limbo of whether or not Naf was going to get cut, and then starting this season with losing to Sashi and missing Pro League for the first time since Season 1, I actually do think there are things to be hopeful about with Team Liquid, and it's not as dire as it may have seemed based on everything happening. But before we go any further, the sponsor of today's video. Skin Club is a top adult, that means 18 plus, case opening site with a huge variety of cases that can be unboxed to collect and upgrade skins. Skin Club's provably fair system guarantees a fair chance to all players that you can easily track, whether you're unboxing alone in your room or against users or bots on LAN, or anywhere in between. Skin Club lets you open individual cases solo, or you can try to unbox your favorite skin or a skin from your favorite creator. Hey, Vitality is on here, and so is Kerrigan. If you've had enough of that, come back another time and activate your daily case, which Skin Club has for free with up to 13 different levels based on your experience. If you'd rather try something different, you can find your perfect match in battle on Battle Tinder, or you can weigh the risks to upgrade your undesired garbage skins for something actually useful. Just put in the skin, look for an upgrade, and let it spin. Skin Club offers themed events monthly, bringing new cases, giveaways, and prizes you can get by playing on the platform. You can deposit with crypto, card, or the skin sitting in limbo that you never touch. Make sure to check out the link in the description for a 7% deposit bonus. I was looking at the stats, and one of the most concerning things about Liquid in the offseason is that in 2024, they had some obvious problems. They had Twists IGLing, and generally, I don't think it looked all that amazing with him IGLing. They had some clear issues. Then going into 2025, they picked up Shuhei, and they picked him up, I think, kind of in an odd timing. But what kind of ended up happening, if you compare their 2024 to their 2025, is that their T sides remained pretty much static in terms of win rate, but their CT sides became much worse, and you have to say that that probably has a lot to do with Naf. The problem is Naf, I think for a lot of 2024, was kind of underrated anchor. Everyone kind of respected that he did a reasonable job, but it's just that he never really got respect as being like a top anchor, especially because Liquid, I think, just wasn't really competing for titles, and in general, it seems like in order to be considered a really good anchor, you definitely need to be competing for titles. That's not to say he didn't have his flaws. Like, I'm not saying he was the best anchor out there, but I think he was more than competent. I think he was a really strong anchor. But in 2025, he's looked like arguably the weakest player on the team. Funnily enough, though, statistically on gun versus gun rounds, he actually has better stats this year than Nertz does. And I let that one sit for a second, but I think there's a lot more to it. You know, stats don't really tell the whole story. And when you look at that, Nertz is another player on Team Liquid that's being asked to go for... What the hell was that from Nav? Nertz is being asked to go for way too many entries. Statistically, he just goes for far too many. By the way, sick lineup. I've always thought about doing this, but it never gets me a kill. That's a sick lineup. Then Nertz uses that contact to get the play on Elige. He knows Elige has to move over to support towards the A site, so he uses that pressure. That's exactly how you're supposed to be lurking. And then he knows that his team, oh, this is so sick. This is the exact type of play. This is really basic CS, okay? It's not like this is some crazy outplay, but this is how you should be playing CS. He gets the kill on the player connector. He knows my team is more than capable of taking A. They already got the entry, plus we killed the rotate. Do I need to support them taking A? No, I can lock down the rotate, because when you go from a 5v5, you should generally be thinking about how can we win this round. I think on both sides, whether it's favored T or CT, you want to be thinking, how can we win this round? But you go to a 5v4, still you're probably thinking, leaning towards how do we win this round? But you go 5v3, you go 4v2, 3v1, and these numbers and above, you really need to immediately switch to thinking, how do we not lose this round? How do our opponents win this round? How do we play against that? Blocking that rotate into Sniper's Nest, into jungle, is going to make a huge difference, because that is one of their main win conditions. You get that rotate in through jungle, you catch someone crossing, they throw a bad molly, you know, all these types of things. That's a win condition. He blocks that. They win the round comfortably. They lose a few too many players, but back on topic, it's hard to say, but it feels like a bit of a coincidence that you yet again have I mean, Nertz isn't necessarily an entry, but he does a lot of the openings, and it feels like he's set up into, it almost feels forced at times times how many he's going for. And we're just coming off the back of them having Yakindar going for a historically insane number of entries because he was like the only aggressive piece. Now, I think Shuhei is a player that is relatively comfortable going aggressive, so maybe that opens Nertz up and they just haven't yet had quite enough time to actually utilize that and slot it in, especially with the change of IGLs. And it is kind of interesting to think about, and something that I want to keep my eye on for the season is how is Nertz utilized. Because again, I mean, Nertz, I think when he joined Liquid, when I was looking at the stats, he was going for something like, I'll give you numbers and then I'll try and contextualize for them. He was going for high 30s, mid to high 30s in terms of opening attempts on gun v gun rounds. And even players that go for a lot of opening attempts, typically they're kind of boosted by how many opening attempts they go for against ecos. High 20s, very low 30s is kind of the peak of where you want in terms of opening attempts. Anything above that, the only person that I've ever seen have success doing that is Donk, but Nertz was at like high 30s and winning more than 50%. And generally, there's a pretty clear line, like as your number of attempts go up, obviously your success rate typically goes down. Nertz was doing insane at first, and then he kind of tapered off. And again, that does remind me a little bit of the way Yakindar's time on Team Liquid went. Now, the actual game we're watching here is a loss. I mean, it's Liquid losing to FaZe on map 1 of their best of 3. Liquid did bring them to 3 maps, and this is one of the games where I think it's a game that I think for both teams it was a bit of a test, but especially for Liquid, I think they've had some really shaky results recently. I think they can be relatively happy with the way this one played out, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily look or feel like Liquid played the best of CS and FaZe kind of pulled off some magic to win this one. FaZe played pretty good and Liquid just wasn't able to get to that next level. And it feels like that's often the problem for Liquid, where they start to collapse in these games when they get close, when it gets hectic. They start to, I don't want to say play for themselves, but at times it does feel like that, at least a little bit, where they kind of just fall back into some bad habits at times, and they don't really necessarily have that kind of fundamental backbone of their teamwork to support them when things are going wrong, but they can snowball it when things are going right, it feels like. But regardless, watching this game, we'll talk about the actual game we're watching for a second, because that's probably what you're here for. Just kidding. You're here for my Korean fried chicken recipe. Also kidding. Rain on the A-hold, really solid double. Then he manages to escape under the smoke, and somehow Ultimate actually takes him down. One of the bright points for Liquid definitely is Ultimate. It took him a little bit of time, but they gave him plenty of time, and he really has developed into a quite a strong player in general. He's kind of shed that little bit where, especially near the start with him on Liquid, it felt like teams kind of understood, okay, he's going to go for an opening somewhere. We just have to wait for it and find it. And again, it does feel like sometimes, like, isn't that something a coach should be noticing, an IGL should be noticing and trying to fix? I don't know. It's neither here nor there. Ultimate currently doing a very good job of things, generally has a really good standing, and finds himself in a lot of really great situations. Great movement on that kill there. I actually want to see that from Frozen's POV. I'm working on an aim video that should hopefully be releasing very soon, and this type of movement it's such an underrated part of aim. If it doesn't matter how good your aim is, how fast you kill your opponent, if your opponent kills you 0.01 second faster, right? Like you could have the fastest time to kill of anyone in the world, except for everyone that shoots at you has it slightly faster, and it no longer matters, right? And it is kind of surprising if you actually look at Donk, for example. His time to kill isn't that insane. It's quick, but he actually just tends to make his opponents miss a lot. And when they miss, he's very consistent at, like, he gets the really quick kills too. But if both of you don't get an instant kill, Donk wins that fight. I would love to see the actual data, but I'm not sure if if there's any real way to get that. But it's like, if the kill doesn't happen immediately, Donk almost always, it feels like, wins that spray battle, wins that next little bit where most players end up going a bit 50-50 in those moments. But here, basically execing A into a 4A stack is really never going to go all that well for you. But because of the way Liquid ran this, they go 2 Palace and 3 towards ramp, with the way they're running it, I believe this is essentially the A exec that Spirit was running for a lot of last year. I'm not sure who necessarily came up with it, but I definitely saw Spirit run it more than almost any other team. And they would generally run it with 4 players ramp, meaning you could have a trade on twists there. And it feels like if they had a trade, that could have maybe even gone slightly differently. Well, it definitely would have gone slightly differently, but maybe it could have gone better for them. But still, you're walking into a 4A stack. It's not expected to go all that well for you. And it leaves Naf into a 1v4, which he's just not really got much chance of winning. Saving your Mac 10, always kind of questionable. And I actually feel like this is just an objectively bad idea. I know that's kind of heresy to say about a professional player, but what does the Mac 10 do? What does a Mac 10 saved actually do for you? Almost nothing. And not only that, but your round 10, these rounds are so important right now. Saving a Mac 10 so that you can go into this round with a Mac 10 that's just, it's not going to get anything done. And then like if we skip over this, now he goes into the kind of game making gun round. Like this is the difference between 9-3 and 7-5. Really, if they lose this, is they're kind of getting 9-3 almost certainly. And he's got a Deagle. Like, that just seems like I can't really justify the reason. Now, I think he really objectively needed to die there. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it like I see it. In these videos, I try my best to give good reasoning behind why a player might have done something, even if it's not necessarily something that I think is the best play, but just to understand that there is logic even behind misplays or plays that aren't the best. There's always logic behind it. And if you know that logic, it can help you a lot, certainly, to learn the game better, right? So I try and give that as much as possible. The logic behind this one was saving is better than dying, but I don't think that logic actually holds up when you have a Mac 10. Maybe he thought there was like a rifle down somewhere and he was going to pick it up right at the end. Anyways, 2v3. Naf, still with the Deagle, did get a kill somehow, so I guess, I suppose, hindsight bias, it was a good play. And Twist, man, Twist, when I watch Twist, I feel like Twist is underrated. Because when I look at Twist, I haven't been studying him for too much this season, but near the end of last season, I was looking quite a bit at Twist as an IGL. Like, how much did that hurt his play as an individual? And when I watched him, it was like, they would give Nerds all of the nice opening plays, you know? Everyone wants to be an opener. Opener as in you take that space on the map. You're the guy taking connector control. You're the guy working a pick on B, like if you're working a pick through apps, you know, you're taking banana control. You're taking control of areas. And usually when you talk about openers, they have support, right? They're getting flashed into a spot. They have, you know, 3 players. They're trying to catch their opponents off guard. And that opener is there to do so. And I would see a lot of the time it would be Nerds as the opener, but then you would have Twists as like the entry. Like you would go into a bomb site hit and Twists would go out first in that kind of sacrificial role, but he would still frag insanely well in that role a lot of the time. And that wasn't like his only job. He definitely pivoted between a few different ways of being utilized. But when I saw him playing like that, he would consistently get entries in kind of the most ridiculous scenarios that it never felt like he got any credit for. You know, you see other players that do those types of roles in the mid round. It's not a role you really want to be doing. You're just a lot of the time you're just going to end up dying. But he was willing to pick up that role to allow his teammates to have, you know, more comfortable gunfights, and he would do a really good job of it. And I feel like he never really got credit for that. But regardless, Brokey gets credit for very little. I almost said he wasn't in my top 20 oppers of all time, and by almost, I definitely did say that because vibes-wise, he just didn't feel like he was in a top 20 opper, but like, you know, when you actually make the list, there really aren't 20 oppers better than Brokey all time, but, you know, he just doesn't... It just, to me, just didn't feel like he would, you know. I'm making excuses for like something that people don't know. I'd say, you know what I'm saying? And people are like, no, you're absolutely losing your mind to say something like that. Okay, really quick mid take from FaZe, setting the tone. And I really like, I think this is one of the things Karrigan does really well is kind of set up a half to put their opponents in the most uncomfortable scenarios. I think all the great IGLs do a pretty good job of this, at least a pretty good job of it, of setting up the half, setting the tone. And one of the things is you get aggressive early on in a half. You force your opponents to, Naf, you have to get that kill. Oh, dear God. Look, I'm a stats guy through and through. I like the stats, but the eye test is necessary as well. And the problem is, statistically, NAF is not struggling as hard as he is eye test wise. The eye test really hurts NAF a lot. If you only look at the stats, it doesn't look good either this season. I'm talking about this season. But not quite as bad as he just needs to get that kill. Man, come on. You just have to be getting that kill. But yeah, you play aggressive early on. Your opponents are thereby incentivized to use a lot of utility early on in the half, or early on in the rounds, and that gives you some openings later in the rounds to walk into bomb sites where your opponents have no utility. You can do contact plays and things like that well, you can do like execs and stuff that really put them in uncomfortable spots. Nice trading by FaZe into the A site hit. One of the things that you would think is like kind of classic FaZe in theory is that they can go into some kind of iffy hits where they just don't have perfect utility. They're kind of in awkward spots because they play a little looser in the early round, and they're not necessarily always in the perfect spacing, but they can still create routes into the bomb site that allow them to trade out or at least take space effectively without just dying for nothing. Liquid, 5 USPs in window. Every time I've ever done this, it fails, except for there's been about 3 or 4 times in my life that someone's like, we should 5 USP window. And I go, dude, people keep telling me to do this. This is the 50th time we're doing this. It's not worked a single time. And that's the only time it's ever worked. So like twice or 3 times I've been like, why are we doing this? It's terrible. It's never going to work. And then, of course, those are the only 2 or 3 times it's ever worked. In this case, Liquid had faith in their IGL. He says 5 window, and they get punished for it. I don't even know what I'm saying, man. Okay. Liquid on a pretty terrible buy. This time not helped along by someone saving a MAC-10, but they just need to be fighting. And a lot of the times you'll see teams fighting early and middle in these types of buys because you can do so with not the most utility. But there actually is, I say that, but there actually is a surprising amount of necessary utility to fight in mid if you want to have like any, Rain is not supposed to be getting 2 kills there. This is one of the things where he didn't hit an insane shot. He just hit a couple decent shots and nobody hit any insane shots back at him, which is surprisingly effective at all levels, even the professional level, to just not miss just not miss the body shots, finish them off in a second or 2 and be happy with it. But there is a surprising amount of necessary utility to fight in middle because you need at least 2 flashes, plus you need the molly behind the boxes. Otherwise, you're really just gambling that they're not going there. Obviously, FaZe were fighting heavily in middle to begin with, so you could see Liquid potentially dump a lot of utility in mid to fight that, but at the same time, then you're just gambling. Like, if they don't go mid, we just used every piece of utility we had, and we still eventually probably have to give up mid control anyways. Like, if they just play back off of mid and then, look to take control of it late, we kind of like ancient middle, eventually. I mean, you can hold on to mid on Mirage, but it's a little uncomfortable usually. Still, again, FaZe just overloading mid. And when it's working, it's working. Some teams are really good. I'd say most teams at the pro level are going to be pretty good. They're going to have a lot of variety. But if you play this at like, an intermediate or main level or below, some teams are really good at fighting you in mid. And some teams are good at just like, sometimes you can be really effective at CTs just giving up mid and just saying, hey, you guys aren't going to be able to walk into the bomb site and get anything done. You don't have finishers, so we just set ourselves up in a really good, opening scenario. We play, op starts ticket, like this is a standard kind of late round scenario. Op starts ticket, although it's really ultimate. Actually, this smoke actually completely screws them. It actually, and I don't know if they were planning on walking through this smoke regardless, but this smoke completely screws them because ultimate is ticket where you want him to be. Okay, never mind, he gets a kill anyways, because that is not an easy shot. It does not make it any easier, but I was gonna say it absolutely screws them. If he missed that shot, I would say it would actually screws them. But yeah, you go back into this setup with the op on ticket. You have a player close ramp. You have like one short, one outside window or jungle area. And you kind of just say like, look, you're not going to be able to execute in the bomb site here, and we're just going to defend it. And oftentimes, I think even in the pro scene, you see teams that struggle with that, depending on, the aim and the positioning of the players they're playing against. Obviously, FaZe not finding any problems with Liquid in this game. However, when Brokey is having a 20-7 performance, and he was hitting some pretty solid shots, FaZe are going to look like a pretty damn good team, okay? Because they're not bad all the time. Forget about FaZe. Does Liquid have any hope? Yes. No bias at all as an NA fan. It's not that I want them to win or anything, but there is hope for Liquid. They could do something.